Dr. Elias Crane opened his eyes to a strange silence. The morning light filtered through broken windows, cutting across the floor in thin, golden lines. He sat up slowly, stretching his stiff muscles, and blinked at the unfamiliar room. It had once been a hospital wing, he realized, though now the walls were crumbling and covered with streaks of green moss. Dust hung in the air, sparkling faintly in the sunbeams. The smell of old wood and rust filled his nose. Something about the stillness made his chest tighten, the kind of silence that made a man question whether he was truly alive or merely a dream. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood, noticing the empty corridors. Hallways that had once been full of nurses and patients were now stripped bare. The fluorescent lights, long dead, left shadows that danced in the sunlight from broken windows. His footsteps echoed loudly on the cracked tiles. For a moment, the sound startled him. The city had grown loud over the centuries, and now even a single step felt thunderous. Elias stepped carefully through the ruins, trying to remember what had happened. He remembered the world before the silence, streets full of cars, buildings full of people, and the constant noise of human life. And then, nothing. He could not remember the last time he had seen another living human being. The memory was a blur, like smoke slipping through his fingers. He could only remember waking up here, in this abandoned place, with no explanation, no warning, and no one to answer his questions. The hospital corridor led him outside. The city stretched before him like a graveyard. Skyscrapers towered overhead, their glass shattered and facades crumbling. Trees had started to grow through cracks in the pavement. Vines clung to walls like silent fingers, creeping higher with every passing day. Birds had begun to make homes in the broken buildings. The once familiar skyline now looked like a wild kingdom reclaiming its territory. Elias walked slowly, observing everything. His mind tried to make sense of the emptiness. He called out, but his voice bounced back only as an echo. He called again, louder this time, but no answer came. No footsteps. No human voices, only the sound of the wind and the distant call of a hawk circling above. The realization hit him again. He was alone. Perhaps the last human alive. He wandered through the city, following streets he remembered from his childhood. Memories of laughter, shouting children, the smell of bakeries, the sound of trains. All of it felt like a dream from another life. The world had changed in ways he could barely understand. Nature was taking back what humans had once claimed. Asphalt cracked and split, allowing grass and weeds to grow through. Rusted cars leaned on their sides, half buried in soil and moss. The world was quiet, but it was alive in ways he had never noticed. Hours passed as he explored. He felt the hunger of loneliness pressing on him, an ache he had never known before. His stomach growled, reminding him that he needed food. He rummaged through abandoned stores and homes, finding cans of food long past expiration, dry grains, and water that was mostly stagnant but still drinkable after boiling. His survival instincts kicked in automatically, though a part of him felt numb. Survival without purpose felt like an empty ritual. As he wandered, something caught his eye. In the dust of a wide plaza, near the ruins of what had once been a fountain, he noticed something that made his heart stop. Footprints, fresh footprints, leading across the plaza and into a side street. They were not deep, but the pattern was clear. Someone or something had been here recently. His mind raced. Could it be an animal? No. The footprints were too human in shape, though smaller and lighter than his own. Someone had walked here not long ago. Elias dropped to his knees, examining the tracks carefully. The dust was soft, but the prints were precise. He could see the shape of toes, the curve of arches, and even the slight pressure of heels. Whoever had made them had walked deliberately, without rushing. He followed the trail with his eyes, noticing that it continued into a narrow street that wound between buildings. A mix of fear and hope surged through him. Fear, because he had believed he was truly alone. Hope, because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't. Maybe humanity had not vanished completely. Maybe someone had survived. Maybe there was a reason for his own survival. He stood and decided to follow the tracks. Each step he took brought a strange thrill and a cautious fear. He had no weapon, no plan, only a desperate curiosity. The street twisted and turned, overgrown with vines and grass. The footprints led him past an old library, its doors hanging crooked on their hinges. He could see piles of books inside, some burned, some damp, pages curling and yellowing with age. He wondered if the person who had made the tracks had looked here. Had they read the stories of the past? Had they remembered humans the way he did? Elias continued. The footprints seemed to lead him farther from the center of the city, into quieter areas. He passed old houses, some with collapsed roofs, others still standing but empty and broken. Windows stared at him like blind eyes. The streets were littered with debris, rusted bicycles, shattered toys, empty cans, remnants of lives once lived. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, then began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows. The footprints led him to the edge of the city, where the ruins gave way to open land. Tall grasses swayed in the wind, and distant hills rose in the haze. He stopped to catch his breath, feeling both exhaustion and anticipation. Whoever had left these tracks was somewhere ahead. As he rested, he thought about what it meant. Humanity had vanished, or so he believed. But these tracks suggested that someone remained. Perhaps not a full society, but a survivor. He wondered about their story. How had they lived? Where had they hidden? Were they afraid, like he had been? Or had they embraced the new world? The sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Elias realized that night would fall soon, and he had no shelter prepared. He considered turning back, but the curiosity was stronger. He had to know. He had to see the person who had walked here, leaving a silent message across the dust of the earth. He followed the trail as the light faded. Shadows grew longer, and the world became harder to see. He slowed, careful with every step. The air cooled, and the wind whispered through the tall grasses. In the distance, he saw movement quick, deliberate, and fleeting. Someone was ahead. Someone was moving, keeping just out of sight, yet leaving a trail for him to follow. Elias's heart pounded. He wanted to call out, but the words stuck in his throat. He did not know if they would respond, or if they would run. He did not know if this was another human or something else entirely. The uncertainty made him nervous, but also alive in a way he had not felt for years. He crept forward, trying to stay hidden while still keeping the trail in sight. The movement ahead stopped suddenly, and he froze. He waited, holding his breath. Minutes passed. Then, just as the last light of the sun disappeared behind the hills, he saw it. A figure, crouched near a stream, examining something on the ground. The figure was humanoid, small and lithe, moving with careful precision. Its face was hidden, but the outline suggested intelligence and awareness. Elias stepped forward cautiously, and a twig snapped under his foot. The figure froze. For a moment, the world seemed suspended. Then, the figure turned its head slightly, as if sensing him. Elias wanted to speak, to reassure them, but no words came. He simply watched, hoping that this survivor, would not flee. The wind rustled, and the figure disappeared into the shadows. The footprints had stopped here. Elias knelt by the stream, looking at the damp earth, noticing new tracks he had not seen before. Fresh, deliberate, full of life. Someone was here. Someone had left a message without words, a message that said, "I am alive. I am here." Elias felt a surge of hope and determination. He had followed the tracks for hours, and now he had proof that he was not alone. He would find this being, he would speak with them, learn from them, and perhaps, in time, rebuild something that had been lost. Humanity might have faded, but its essence, its curiosity, its ingenuity its drive to connect still lingered. As night fell, Elias made camp near the stream, keeping the tracks in sight. He felt the weight of isolation less heavily now. He was not truly alone. Someone had left a path for him, a reminder that even in the silence of a vanished world, life found a way to leave its mark. He lay down, staring at the stars, thinking about the days to come. He knew the path ahead would be uncertain, dangerous, and full of unknowns, but he also knew one thing with certainty. He would follow the tracks. Whoever or whatever had left them would reveal the future of this empty earth, and he would be there to witness it. The night passed quietly, the only sounds being the whisper of wind through grass and the occasional rustle of an unseen animal. Elias slept fitfully, dreaming of voices, laughter, and footsteps not his own. When he awoke, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, and the footprints glistened faintly in the dew. The journey was just beginning. Elias rose with the first light of dawn, the cool morning air brushing against his face. The footprints he had followed yesterday glistened faintly in the dew, leading into the tall grass and distant hills. The world around him seemed alive, yet still empty of humans, and he felt both excitement and fear. He had to know who or what had left those tracks. The idea of another living being on Earth made his heart pound with a mixture of hope and caution. He packed the few supplies he had salvaged the day before: some dried food, a water bottle, a small knife, and a blanket. Each item felt precious, a link to survival in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. As he stepped carefully into the tall grass, he realized how quiet everything had become. The city behind him was hidden in the morning haze, leaving him alone with the sounds of nature. Birds chirped above, and somewhere in the distance, a deer leapt gracefully through a meadow. Elias felt a strange mixture of awe and melancholy. Life persisted even without humans to notice it. The footprints led him over uneven ground, up small hills, and across narrow streams. Each step required care. The grass hid stones and fallen branches. Elias moved slowly, following the path left behind. He tried to imagine the person who had walked here. Strong, cautious, intelligent. Whoever it was, they had been careful not to disturb the environment unnecessarily. The tracks suggested someone who respected the land, who moved lightly and deliberately. That realization gave him a strange comfort. Perhaps humans were not entirely gone. Perhaps someone had survived by learning the lessons of a world that had outgrown its previous caretakers. By midday, Elias had reached the edge of a small forest. The trees were thick and ancient, their roots curling across the ground like snakes. The footprints entered the shade of the forest, and Elias paused. Shadows stretched between the trunks, and the sound of the wind through the leaves was almost deafening in its stillness. He took a deep breath and entered. Each step was quiet, the soft ground muffling his movements. He tried to remain calm, focusing on the trail rather than his racing thoughts. As he moved deeper, he noticed small signs of intelligence scattered around. A circle of stones with ashes in the center suggested someone had made a fire here. Nearby, a pile of twigs and leaves looked arranged rather than random, as if someone had been using them for shelter or to store items. Elias knelt down, examining the objects carefully. They were fresh, not years old, and the placement of the stones indicated deliberate thought. Whoever had been here had skills, knowledge, and survival instincts far beyond what he had imagined for a lone survivor. Elias continued along the trail, finding more evidence. Small traps for animals had been set near streams, cleverly camouflaged with leaves. Containers made from bark held water collected from rain. Marks on trees suggested someone had been marking the path or leaving messages. Elias realized that the being he pursued was not just surviving, it was thriving. They had adapted to the world, learned its rhythms, and moved with the confidence of one who belonged to the land in a way humans had forgotten. Hours passed, and Elias felt both tired and exhilarated. The trail led him to a small clearing, bathed in sunlight. There, he saw fresh footprints leading to a narrow cave at the base of a hill. The entrance was partly hidden by bushes, and the ground around it bore signs of recent activity. Elias approached carefully, noting the impressions of bare feet and the delicate arrangement of stones and leaves at the entrance. Whoever lived here had taken care to leave the area clean and organized. The thought filled him with admiration. Humanity, or at least its essence, persisted in ways he had never imagined. He crouched near the cave, observing. No movement came, but the air smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. Elias wondered if the person inside was aware of him. The thought made his pulse quicken. Should he call out? Wait quietly? Step closer? He decided to wait. Patience, he knew, would be the key. Whoever this was, they had survived in solitude for a long time. They might be cautious, even fearful, of strangers. Elias could not risk startling them. As he waited, his mind wandered. He thought about the world that had once been. Cities filled with life. Machines humming. Humans everywhere. And now, silence. And yet, the footprints were proof that life continued. Not all had vanished. Not all had surrendered to emptiness. That thought filled him with determination. He would learn from this being, understand their ways, and perhaps, together, find a new path for humanity. By late afternoon, Elias decided to move closer. He approached the cave slowly, careful not to make noise. The footprints became clearer as he neared the entrance, showing intricate details of movement. The pressure of toes, slight shifts in weight, and even marks where someone had paused to look around. He crouched at the edge of the cave, peering inside. The interior was dimly lit by a small fire, the smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling. Objects were arranged neatly: bundles of cloth, stacks of food, and tools made from wood and stone. Whoever lived here had created a space of order and safety in a world that had lost both. Then, he saw movement. A figure, small and agile, crouched near the fire. It was humanoid, with lean limbs and careful, deliberate movements. Its face was partly hidden, but Elias could see sharp eyes, scanning the space with intelligence and awareness. The figure moved quickly, almost silently. Tending to the fire and checking the supplies, Elias held his breath, unsure whether to reveal himself. He did not want to frighten this being. Yet, the need for connection, for understanding, pressed against him with urgency. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hello?" he said, his voice soft. The figure froze, ears twitching, eyes widening. For a long moment, neither moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath along with them. Then, the figure shifted slightly. As if deciding whether to flee or stay, Elias took another step, careful and deliberate, trying to show calm and patience. Finally, the figure spoke. A soft voice, cautious but clear. "Who are you?" it asked. Elias was startled to hear speech. It sounded human, yet different, as if shaped by the isolation and survival of countless years. "My name is Elias," he replied gently. "I've been alone for a long time. I followed your tracks." He paused, unsure how the being would react. "I mean no harm. I want to learn, to understand." The figure studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, it relaxed. You are human?" it asked. Elias nodded. "Yes. I thought I was alone." The being's eyes softened, curiosity replacing caution. "You are not alone," it said. "I have been here. I survive." Elias felt a surge of relief and hope. Someone else existed. Someone else had endured. Humanity, it seemed, had not completely vanished. Over the next few hours, Elias and the being who introduced herself as Mira shared their stories. Mira had lived in the forest for years, learning from the land and avoiding dangers that had claimed others. She had grown skilled at survival, adapting to the rhythms of the earth. Elias shared what he remembered of the world before the silence. Of human cities and civilization, both listened intently, realizing that each had much to learn from the other. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Elias and Mira began to work together. They prepared food, gathered water, and reinforced the cave. Elias marveled at Mira's ingenuity. Simple tools made from stone and wood, clever methods of collecting rainwater, and ways to store food without it spoiling. Mira, in turn, listened to Elias's ideas, fascinated by the knowledge he carried from the world before. Together, they created a rhythm, a partnership that neither had known in years of solitude. Night fell, and the forest was alive with sounds. The distant howl of a wolf, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional chirp of an owl. Elias lay near the fire, watching Mira move silently, her presence both comforting and inspiring. The world was no longer entirely empty. The tracks had led him here, to proof that humanity's spark could survive, adapt, and even thrive. He felt hope stir within him, a feeling he had thought lost forever. Before sleep, Elias and Mira talked quietly, sharing thoughts, dreams, and fears. They spoke of rebuilding, of exploring further, and of finding others, if any remained. The stars shone above, unchanging and eternal, while the earth slowly healed itself around them. Elias realized that this was the beginning, not of the end, but of a new chapter. Together, they would follow the footprints of life, learning from the past and shaping a future where humanity could endure once more. As he drifted to sleep, Elias felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path had been long and uncertain, but it had led him to Mira. The footprints, once mysterious and silent, had become a bridge between isolation and companionship. Tomorrow, they would continue exploring, searching, and surviving together. For the first time in years, Elias felt a sense of purpose and belonging. Humanity, he realized, was not defined by numbers or cities. It was defined by courage, intelligence, and the will to continue, even when the world seemed silent. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting long, warm beams onto the forest floor. Elias stirred from sleep, the chill of dawn still lingering in the air. Mira was already awake, crouched near the small stream that ran beside their cave. Her hands working to gather water, she moved with the precision of someone who had lived alone for years, yet her presence now seemed less solitary, more part of a shared rhythm. Elias watched her silently, a quiet awe filling him. He had followed her tracks across the wilderness, and now, here she was, alive and capable, showing him that humans could survive and even thrive when they adapted. He stretched and rose, careful not to disturb her. "Good morning," he said softly. Mira glanced up, a faint smile touching her lips. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried a hint of curiosity, as though she had been expecting him to ask about the world beyond the forest. Elias nodded, picking up his small pack and walking toward the fire, still faint from last night. "Shall we see what the day brings?" he asked. Mira's eyes gleamed. "Yes," she said. "There is much to learn." They began by exploring the immediate area around the cave. Elias noticed how Mira moved through the forest. She was careful, respectful of the plants and animals, leaving nothing damaged or wasted. Every step seemed deliberate, balanced, and intelligent. She pointed out edible roots, herbs with medicinal properties, and small patches where fruits had begun to grow again. Elias marveled at her knowledge, realizing that surviving alone for years had made her attuned to nature in ways he could not yet understand. As they walked, Elias asked questions, eager to understand her life. Mira explained that she had learned from the remains of the Old World books, notes, scraps of technology, and through careful observation of the environment. She had avoided the dangers that had destroyed other humans, crumbling structures, unstable roads, and hidden threats in abandoned cities. She had relied on her instincts and intelligence to adapt. Elias listened, fascinated, and occasionally shared stories from before the silence. When humanity had been everywhere, building, creating, and connecting, hours passed, and the footprints that had led Elias to Mira became part of a larger pattern. She showed him how others might have moved, how signs of life were subtle but present. Broken branches in certain directions, small piles of stones marking safe paths, and shallow depressions in soil, indicating where animals had been hunted or trapped. Elias began to understand that survival was not only about strength but about observation, patience, and ingenuity. Humanity had survived here in fragments, and these traces, these footprints, were evidence of both intelligence and perseverance. By midday, they reached a small ridge overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking. Trees stretching endlessly, rivers glinting in the sunlight, and patches of what had once been farmland, now slowly returning to wilderness. Mira gestured toward the distant hills. "I think there may be more like me," she said. Elias's heart leapt. "More survivors?" he asked. Mira nodded. "Possibly. Or they may be new humans, adapted differently. We must be careful. Not all are friendly, but not all are dangerous either." Elias nodded, understanding the delicate balance of trust and caution. They began to descend toward the valley. Moving quietly, Mira pointed out signs of habitation along the way. Small shelters, cleared patches for crops, and tools left near streams. Each sign spoke of careful planning and ingenuity. Someone had been here, observing, surviving, and leaving messages in the environment. Much like the tracks Elias had followed to find Mira, he felt a growing sense of wonder. Humanity, though diminished, had not surrendered. It had learned, adapted, and persisted. As they approached the first signs of shelter, the wind shifted, carrying a faint sound. Elias froze. Mira crouched low, her eyes scanning the area. From behind a cluster of trees, a figure appeared, moving cautiously. Elias noticed the difference immediately. The being was smaller than Mira, lean and quick, but it had the same intelligence in its eyes, the same careful awareness of its surroundings. Mira stepped forward slowly, raising a hand in greeting. The figure hesitated, then relaxed slightly, recognizing her presence. "This one is human?" the figure asked in a quiet, cautious voice. Mira nodded. "Yes, his name is Elias. He followed my tracks to find me." Elias stepped forward, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Hello," he said. "I mean no harm. I've been alone for a long time. I want to learn, to understand, and I want to help." The figure studied him for a long moment, then spoke. "I am Leora. I have watched for signs, for safety. It is rare to see another human now." Her voice carried both curiosity and caution. Elias felt a sense of relief. More humans, more survivors, meant that humanity's story was not over. Mira nodded to Leora, and together they began to communicate, sharing knowledge about survival, the forest, and the challenges of a world reclaimed by nature. Leora led them to her small settlement, hidden among dense trees. The structures were simple but clever. Huts made of wood and leaves, water collected in natural containers, and small gardens where edible plants thrived. Each element reflected adaptation, ingenuity, and an understanding of balance with the environment. Elias and Mira were amazed. Leora had built a thriving community alone, proving that humans could survive in isolation, but also create order, safety, and structure. Over the next few days, Elias, Mira, and Leora explored the surrounding lands together. They discovered remnants of old cities, now overgrown with trees and grass, and signs of wildlife reclaiming the spaces once dominated by humans. They found old libraries, schools, and laboratories, all abandoned but still holding knowledge. Elias realized that humanity's legacy remained, waiting for someone to rediscover it. The thought filled him with determination. He wanted to learn, preserve, and perhaps rebuild what had been lost. As they traveled, they encountered challenges. Rivers had changed course, fallen trees blocked paths, and areas of land had become unstable. Yet, together, they overcame each obstacle, combining skills and knowledge. Mira's understanding of the forest, Leora's ingenuity in constructing shelter, and Elias's memory of the old world made them a capable team. They discovered that survival was not only about individual skill but about cooperation, learning from one another, and sharing knowledge. One evening, they reached the ruins of a small town. The streets were cracked and overgrown, buildings leaning dangerously. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. This place had once been full of life, children playing, markets bustling, families living. Now, it was quiet and abandoned. Yet, as they explored, they found signs that someone had passed through recently: footprints, carefully placed tools, and even small fires that had been lit and extinguished. The same pattern repeated itself, life leaving subtle messages in the environment. Elias and Mira set up camp in a small square, while Leora explored further. They watched the sunset together, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples. Elias thought about the path that had brought him here, from the empty streets of the city, to the forest, to Mira, and now to Leora. Each step had revealed signs of survival, intelligence, and hope. Humanity was not gone. It had adapted, survived, and continued in ways he could have never imagined. That night, around the fire, they shared stories. Leora spoke of her life in isolation, her careful observation of nature, and the strategies she had developed to survive. Mira shared her knowledge of the forest, the plants, the animals, and the ways she had learned to live in harmony with the land. Elias spoke of the world before the silence, of human achievements, mistakes, and dreams. The exchange of knowledge strengthened their bond, creating a sense of community that had been missing from the earth for so long. The fire flickered and danced in the cool night air. The forest around them was alive, not with humans, but with life animals moving in the darkness, trees whispering in the wind, and the distant hum of rivers flowing. Elias felt a deep sense of awe. This world had been left behind by humans, yet it had grown, adapted, and thrived. And now, humanity was returning not in numbers, but in spirit, intelligence, and resilience. Over the following days, they continued exploring. They found more signs of life, subtle evidence that others might still survive in hidden places. Abandoned towns held small gardens, hidden shelters, and tools left behind. The world was quiet, but it was alive, and humanity's presence lingered in the intelligence and care of those who survived. Elias realized that the footprints he had followed were not just a path, they were a message. A reminder that life could endure, even when it seemed lost. Elias, Mira, and Leora began planning for the future. They discussed ways to explore further, search for other survivors, and preserve the knowledge of the past. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries, but also hope. They were learning not only how to survive but how to thrive, to create order and safety in a world that had once forgotten them. The forest, the rivers, and the hills had become their allies, teaching them lessons that humans had long ignored. One evening, as they rested near a stream, Elias looked at the footprints that had started this journey. They had led him to Mira, and together, they had found Leora. The tracks were no longer just impressions in the dust, they were symbols of endurance, intelligence, and hope. Humanity had not vanished. It had changed, adapted, and survived in the most unexpected ways. And now, Elias felt a sense of purpose. He would follow these signs, learn from them, and help guide humanity toward a new beginning. Night fell once again, and the forest was alive with sound. Elias lay near the fire, Mira beside him, and Leora across the stream. The stars shone brightly above, unchanging and eternal, while the earth slowly healed itself around them. Tomorrow, they would continue exploring, searching, and learning. Each footprint, each sign, each trace of life was a reminder that humanity's spirit endured. They were not alone, they had found each other, and together, they would discover what the future of this silent earth could become. The morning sunlight filtered through the dense leaves of the forest, painting the ground with streaks of gold and green. Elias stirred, stretching and shaking off the chill of the early dawn. Mira and Leora were already awake, gathering water from the nearby stream and preparing for the day ahead. Unlike the first days of solitude, there was a sense of purpose now. The silence of the earth no longer felt empty, it hummed with the promise of discovery, of life, and of the possibility that humanity could endure once more. They had decided to follow another set of signs, remnants of footprints, and carefully arranged markers that suggested other survivors might exist. The forest had grown wild in the centuries without humans. Yet it was alive and vibrant. Birds darted between the trees, and small animals scurried through the undergrowth. Elias noticed how Mira moved through this wilderness with absolute confidence. Every step, deliberate and careful, leaving almost no trace. Leora, too, moved with practiced grace, pointing out edible plants, hidden water sources, and subtle changes in the terrain that signaled danger or opportunity. The three of them walked together in silence for hours, following the faint trail. Each marker they discovered told a story. A pile of stones marking a path, broken branches indicating a route through dense foliage, and faint impressions in the soil that showed someone had paused to look around. Elias felt a thrill of curiosity. These signs were not just tracks, they were messages. Someone, somewhere, had been here before, watching, surviving, and leaving clues for others. By midday, they reached a clearing atop a hill, and the view took Elias's breath away. The valley below was lush, filled with forests, streams, and patches of land where remnants of human habitation could still be seen. Here and there, small huts were hidden among trees, evidence of careful survival. Birds and deer moved freely. Yet everything seemed balanced, almost harmonious. Elias realized that this earth, long abandoned by civilization, had healed in remarkable ways. Humanity had left scars, but nature had reclaimed them with patience and quiet strength. As they descended toward the valley, they noticed signs of more recent activity. Small shelters with carefully gathered firewood, simple traps for animals, and small gardens suggested that someone was living here now or had lived very recently. Elias's heart raced. The footprints that had led him to Mira and Leora had now brought them closer to a larger network of survivors. Humanity, it seemed, had not vanished. It had adapted, hidden, and thrived quietly in pockets across the world. They moved cautiously, aware that the inhabitants of the valley might be wary or defensive. Elias kept his hands visible, while Mira and Leora led the way with quiet confidence. As they approached one of the shelters, a figure emerged, tall and lean, with alert eyes that scanned the group warily. Elias stepped forward slowly, speaking gently. "We mean no harm. We are humans, like you. My name is Elias. This is Mira, and this is Leora." The figure paused, studying them carefully. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "I am Kale," he said. "It is rare to see other humans these days. You are welcome, but be cautious. Not all will welcome strangers." Elias felt a shiver of recognition and relief. Kale's caution was reasonable, but the fact that he had spoken, that he had allowed them to approach, was proof that hope still existed. Kale led them to his settlement, hidden among thick trees and cliffs. The site was cleverly constructed, with huts made of wood, stone, and foliage. Small gardens thrived in the sunlight, and a stream provided fresh water. Everything was arranged with careful thought, demonstrating not just survival but intelligence and foresight. Mira and Leora moved quickly, examining the techniques and learning from them, while Elias marveled at the ingenuity on display. Humanity's spirit, he realized, was alive and thriving in those who had adapted. Over the next few days, Elias, Mira, Leora, and Kale explored the valley together. They discovered more signs of life. Hidden shelters, small fields, and even tools fashioned from remnants of the old world. Each discovery reinforced Elias's belief that humanity had not truly vanished. Instead, humans had become cautious, adaptable, and creative, surviving in ways the world had not expected. They were quiet, hidden, and resourceful, leaving signs for others without revealing themselves unnecessarily. The four of them spent time sharing knowledge. Kale explained how he had survived alone for years, observing the land, avoiding dangers, and learning from the environment. Mira demonstrated her skills with plants, water, and natural navigation. Leora shared strategies for concealment, hunting, and fire-making. Elias, in turn, shared what he remembered of cities, technology, and civilization before the silence. Together, they built a rich tapestry of knowledge that combined old and new, past and present. One morning, Elias noticed something unusual in the valley. A small section of the forest seemed intentionally cleared, with patterns in the soil suggesting someone had created a meeting place or marking system. The footprints in this area were fresh, and the impressions of bare feet were unmistakably human. Elias knelt to examine them. The trail led deeper into the trees, disappearing behind a ridge. Mira and Leora approached silently, their expressions serious. Kale nodded. "Someone is nearby," he said. "They may be cautious, or they may welcome us. We must approach carefully." They followed the trail with deliberate care, moving slowly through the forest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made Elias's heart pound. They came to a small clearing and found a young woman crouched by a fire, tending to a small garden. She froze at their arrival, eyes wide with caution. Mira stepped forward slowly, hands raised. "We are humans," she said gently. "We mean no harm. My name is Mira. These are Elias, Leora, and Kale. We found your tracks." The woman studied them carefully, her gaze shifting between each person. Finally, she relaxed slightly. "I am Celine," she said softly. "I thought I was alone. You are other humans." Elias felt a wave of relief and wonder. Humanity, it seemed, had survived in hidden pockets across the world, quietly observing, surviving, and leaving messages for others to follow. Celine led them to her small home, hidden among thick bushes and trees. Her shelter was simple but clever. A small hut made of branches and leaves, a garden with herbs and vegetables, and a careful arrangement of tools. Elias realized that Celine, like Kael, Mira, and Leora, had learned to survive with intelligence, patience, and respect for her environment. Humanity's ingenuity, he thought, was the true legacy that endured. Over the following days, the group explored the valley and surrounding areas. They discovered more shelters, signs of cultivation, and even tools fashioned from remnants of old machines. Each new discovery reinforced the idea that humans had not vanished, they had adapted. They had become cautious, clever, and resourceful, surviving quietly and leaving signs for others to find. Elias felt a deep sense of hope. Humanity's essence had not been lost. It had evolved, hidden, and endured. The group began to form plans. They discussed how to connect the hidden settlements, share knowledge, and protect themselves. Each person brought unique skills. Elias had memory of the old world. Mira knew the forest intimately. Leora had learned survival in isolation. Kael had built a thriving settlement, and Celine had cultivated food and shelter with intelligence and care. Together, they represented the rebirth of humanity, combining knowledge, skill, and perseverance. One evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed with brilliant oranges and purples, Elias stood at the edge of a ridge, looking over the valley. Fires flickered in the distance, each a sign of life, survival, and hope. The earth was no longer silent. Humanity had returned, not in numbers or cities, but in intelligence, adaptability, and spirit. Each footprint, each shelter, each garden was a testament to human endurance. Elias realized that the journey that had begun with one set of footprints had led him to a network of survivors who could rebuild, adapt, and thrive in harmony with the world. As night fell, Elias, Mira, Leora, Kael, and Celine gathered around a fire. They shared stories, plans, and knowledge, creating bonds stronger than the years of isolation had ever allowed. The forest around them was alive with sound. Animals moving in the darkness, trees rustling in the wind, and distant rivers flowing steadily. Elias felt a deep sense of awe. This world, once abandoned, had become a canvas for a new beginning. Humanity had endured not through cities or machines, but through intelligence, ingenuity, and the will to survive. They decided to explore further, map the valley, and seek out any other survivors. The world was vast, and signs suggested that others might still exist in hidden corners. Elias felt a thrill of anticipation. Each discovery, each footprint, each small sign of life was a connection to the past and a bridge to the future. Humanity's story was far from over. It was being rewritten, quietly, carefully, and with hope. Over the next weeks, the group worked together to strengthen their settlements, share knowledge, and explore new areas. They encountered challenges, wild animals, unstable terrain, and remnants of old human structures, but they overcame each obstacle with cooperation, intelligence, and determination. Elias felt a sense of purpose he had never known. The path that had started with a single set of footprints had led him to companions, knowledge, and hope. Humanity, he realized, was not defined by numbers or cities. It was defined by courage, intelligence, and the will to endure. One morning, as they stood atop a hill overlooking the valley, Elias noticed something in the distance. Another set of footprints, leading toward them from the far side of the forest. Fresh, deliberate, human. He smiled, feeling a surge of excitement. The journey was far from over. Humanity was awakening, quietly and intelligently, in hidden corners of the earth. Each footprint was a sign, a message, and a promise. Elias, Mira, Leora, Kyle, and Celine exchanged glances. Together, they would follow these signs, connect the survivors, and build a future where humanity could endure once more. The sun rose, illuminating the valley with golden light. Fires flickered in the distance. Gardens thrived, and the forest hummed with life. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He realized that Earth was no longer a silent place. Humanity's spirit, intelligence, and resilience had endured, leaving tracks for those willing to follow. And he, Elias Crane, would continue walking those paths, learning from the past, exploring the present, and shaping the future. For the first time in centuries, the world felt alive. And for the first time in years, Elias felt that humanity's story was only just beginning.